As for my topic, I would be focusing on the UN Sustainable Development Goals and Sri Lanka's RTI and how they work with each other and how they have worked with each other. Before I move any further, let me just say that the part of today's presentation is a part of a larger study on analyzing linkages between the use of RTI and decreasing corruption and increasing transparency in Sri Lanka, where in today's presentation, I will only be looking at the Commission decisions as well as those from publicly available data. And when I say publicly available data, including traditional media as well as social media reports and videos from Twitter and news feeds and also Facebook. In terms of acknowledgement, I just want to place on record my sincere thanks to RTI Commissioner Ms. Kishali Pinto Jayawardena for her constant guidance and support throughout the study, and also the team of researchers who worked on this. In terms of the study, what we looked at was to analyze both supply side as well as demand side factors, looking at how they would work together in bringing about increased transparency and decreased corruption by the use of RTI. So we are looking at the RTI as the mechanism for bringing about increased transparency and decreasing corruption, if that is the case, whether it is the case or not. And in supply side factors, we looked at how the Commission worked. And when it came to the demand side, we looked at various data made available from not just the Commission, but also from CSOs, civil society organizations, also from those that we saw in publicly available information. Insofar as the assessment criteria is concerned for this study, there were 3 assessment criteria that we looked at: achieving of sustainable development goals, responsiveness at the public authority level, and information disclosure appeals through the Commission. But insofar as today's presentation is concerned, I would only be looking at assessment criteria 1 and no further. Sustainable development goals of the United Nations are many in number, and the 17 SDGs lead to various goals that are very essential for all the countries who are signatories to the United Nations. For this analysis, we picked about few of these and we've clubbed them together to look at the various areas of assessment. They were employment, labor rights, infrastructure, construction, public utility services, land and agriculture, education, health, environment, public procurement, gender equality, and the last one being just, peaceful, and inclusive society and institutional transparency. Now, as the theme of this study itself is to look at whether the use of RTI has, in fact, brought in increased transparency and decreased corruption, this last factor of institutional transparency has played a very, very crucial and important role. From our own studies, what we have seen is there have been many key decisions of the Commission, be it the Akuragoda appeal, where there were certain discrepancies or major discrepancies that were found in payments that were made to consultancy firms in the construction of a defense headquarters. And now through the RTI mechanism, what had happened was these faulty payments, or these payments that were not actually on record, were brought to light. And it could be seen that there was a huge uproar post this order of the Commission. And what is interesting to see is that post the order of the Commission, the Ministry of Defense actually ordered the consultancy firm to pay back the excess amount that was received. And what's even more pertinent to note is that there was an exemption that was pleaded by the public authority on grounds of national security that was not upheld by the Commission. There are also other orders where salaries and other emoluments of senior officials, from the CEO to the head of HR, that were ordered to be paid by the Commission. And this is the second order that I'm referring to, is employees of the Sri Lankan Airlines, the national carrier of Sri Lanka. Again, an order that was widely reported in the media. . We also had Ms. Pinto Jayavardhana mentioning about the key decisions of the commission, including those where the order of requesting that the assets of the prime minister, as well as the members of the parliament, be disclosed. And this was again made possible due to a commission decision. And it should be noted that in this case, there was an exemption that was requested by saying that as far as the 1975 law that already permitted that or required that the politicians declare their assets, but it specifically said this information should not be published. It's worthy to note that the commission made sure that this particular law was overridden by stating that the 2016 RTI Act compels public transparency and in fact overrides any other law. We also have several other orders that are of relevance when we look at it from the terms of, let's say, the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission or that of procurement in tenders, etc. But due to paucity of time, I won't be going into any of that. And it's also important to consider the various case studies that we have looked at through this study of the various orders where there had never been an appeal to the commission, but through information requests, there have been changes of far-reaching consequences, be it a post-mortem report through which the cause of death was exposed, this was in the north, or a simple request asking for the reason behind variations in drinking water led to a gazette notification relating to maximum retail price, or the villagers of Panama who were able to get the documentation relevant to their land, and they've been fighting for it since 2010. So these are some examples of the many, many cases through, or the requests that have been brought to light through RTI. Just to finish up with some numerical data, as far as the assessment criteria 1 on achieving sustainable development goals is concerned, we can see that maximum number of requests to the commission, that is appeals to the commission, have been under institutional transparency. And the numbers, I have to mention that sometimes it's impossible to have an order classified under only one particular heading. You may need to have more than one heading because of the fact that let's say an appeal in relation to budgetary allocations would not only be relevant under institutional transparency, but would also be relevant under infrastructure. So which is why we have an overlap in certain instances, and you have a primary category as well as a secondary category. And we also have information that can see that insofar as appeals are concerned, under institutional transparency, in 75% of the appeals, there have been information disclosure. And from publicly available data, again, we would see that maximum number of requests have been filed in relation to institutional transparency. Again, you have data which shows that in a large number of requests relating to institutional transparency, there has been information disclosure. On a concluding note, there have been several RTI stories that have been reported in the media, as well as through our research in the commission decisions, as well as CSO material, that we can see it has really made an impact, a micro level impact to the common citizen. But in terms of a macro level impact, because the study itself looked at increasing transparency and reducing corruption, we can still say with the data available to us, there is still a gray area. And also, while it's important to note that as both speakers before me, the honorable commissioners of both India as well as Sri Lanka said, proactive disclosure is really essential. But our study only looked at reactive responses, where we looked at transparency from the angle of information disclosure based on requests that have been made. And finally, SDG 16, Sustainable Development Goal number 16, is an enabling provision to ensure that the overarching themes of other sustainable development goals are achieved. And we can see that to a large extent that has been happening. There is definitely need for more progress. And we can see that access to information is not an end to itself, but it's a tool to take action that is needed. And the RTI legislation in Sri Lanka was operationalized in 2017. Within this relatively short span, it has shown great promise of transparency, accountability, and better governance. I'm sure there can be any questions. I'm happy to answer them later during the Q&A. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.